if a brokerage holds the deposit, then the Louisiana Real Estate Commission has clearly defined rules on who gets the deposit based on how the deal fell apart or for what reason the deal fell apart.
Welcome to the RE Real Estate Podcast, where we discuss buying and selling real estate in black and white. Here are your hosts, Ben Harang and Clint Galliano.
Hey Clint, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Ben. How you doing?
I'm doing terrific, man. On a Friday afternoon, sun shining. Cold weather's not here yet, but it's coming. Life is good.
Indeed, indeed.
So
I'm liking the cold weather. I'm in shorts and a t-shirt today, so I'm this sounds very deja vu-ish.
yeah, we talk about real estate in black and white, and here we are. I'm in white, you in black.
Indeed.
So let's talk about the purchase agreement, an 11-page purchase agreement that we're mandated to use by the Louisiana Real Estate Commission, and it's basically a guideline to make sure nothing's left out, and it kind of covers everything. Kind of starts off with the purchase price, obviously, and if you don't put much thought into the offer itself, it can come back to bite you with timelines and things. So you need to have a good idea of what kind of offer you want to submit before you actually put it in writing. And I know you have some thoughts on some specifics.
Yeah. So, I mean, crafting the offer is what we're talking about here. It really depends on the situation and the buyer's goals. If the buyer has cash on hand and they're trying to get the best deal, then they can write an offer that doesn't ask for anything from the seller and maybe is significantly below the asking price. And if they're offering cash, then that maybe they can close in 2 weeks or less.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be advantageous to that buyer because it could be a situation where the seller wants to hurry up and move out of there. A lot of times, cash doesn't really transact differently than finance sales, other than the time it takes to go through with it, because the seller needs to buy their house to move into, and so it doesn't matter if they can close on the house they're selling right away. It won't make them close on the house they're buying any faster.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, they have to find a place to stay in the meantime, unless they've got that already lined up.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, things like whether the house is vacant or not could dictate how fast the seller is able to close. The
Right.
buyer may be able to close quickly. The seller may not be able to close quickly. If they're already out of the house, for whatever reason, the seller probably could close quickly and may be enticing to them rather than waiting the 45 or 60 days it would take for a financed sale. So that's part of the consideration when you are crafting the offer, is the motivation of the buyer as well as the motivation of the seller from a time standpoint.
Yeah. A lot of things get taken into account as far as the what we've talked about so far, as far as what the motivation is, but the type of purchase, if it's going to be a cash sale, if it's going to be a finance sale, what type of financing? Is it going to be a conventional loan? Is it going to be a VA loan? Is it going to be an FHA loan or rural development? Those all have different criteria that you have to pay attention to. A lot of buyers that are able to qualify or at least get a pre-approval for a loan don't necessarily have the cash sitting around to cover closing costs and down payments if the loan type that they're using requires a down payment. And so if they are, then they likely will be asking for concessions from the seller to pay for those closing costs. So that reflects back on what this offer strategy is going to be, as far as if we're trying to get the best price or if we're trying to, get say, okay, well, if we're going to be asking for a bunch of money, maybe we want to consider offering a little bit more to make it more enticing to the seller than what your best actual price that you'd like to pay for the house.
Right. And we oftentimes get caught up on the price, but sometimes price is not the biggest factor. Sometimes it is. Excuse me. It is timing. It is about the type of loan that they're getting and how much cash they have on hand, and the seller's motivation, and so we a lot of times we get caught up on the pricing, but sometimes it's the convenience is more important than the pricing. And when I speak to new agents, I recommend to them learn how to complete a purchase agreement and complete it accurately and completely, because there's not much worse than getting a purchase agreement that, I forgot to check off the loan type. But it's going to go conventional, and we'll change it if we have to FHA. No, that's part of the agreement. So get it right the first time. Take a little longer and talk to the loan officer and do what needs to be done so you can complete it properly and have a chance to get it accepted.
Yeah, because if you come in and check off that you are doing a VA loan and you want 12% closing costs,
Yes.
The listing agent's probably going to look at that and go, they're out of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that agent doesn't know what they're doing.
Right.
And they're going to tell their seller that. And that seller is going to say, well, if they don't know what they're doing, there's probably not a good chance that they're going to be able to close this loan and close this transaction. So, I'm going to reject that.
Well, and that's generally what happens. But the cleaner you can write it, and the more accurately you can write it. Don't ask for more closing costs than you actually need either. Even if the loan product allows it, FHA will allow up to 6% paid by the seller for buyer or seller concessions. But sometimes it's 4%. It doesn't take 6%. So if you ask for 6 and you only end up needing 4%, then the offer is actually 2% better than you're representing it to be to the seller. So if you can be accurate, you still have a better chance of it being accepted.
Yeah. That's actually one of my pet peeves, is not filling out the purchase agreement properly.
Mm-hmm.
Because, accuracy. I'm all about it being accurate, but it can also bite you in the butt.
Mm-hmm. One of the last statements on the purchase agreement is, this is a legally binding contract. If it's not understood, seek competent legal advice. So if you're going to enter into a legally binding contract, all the I's ought to be dotted and the T's ought to be crossed, to give yourself the best chance to be able to buy the house that you want.
Yeah, because if you don't have the right information, it's a train wreck. There's a section on the purchase agreement where you can have other terms and conditions. I can tell you a story about something that I saw happen with another agent where they put where the seller would transfer the flood insurance, but then they didn't follow up and make sure that the flood insurance was transferred. And they thought about it in the closing. And by the time they got to closing, it was too late for the insurance company to transfer the flood insurance. And so that flood insurance policy was pretty much moot.
Wow.
Because they couldn't do anything about it.
It was too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. But it's things like that. It's things like that.
Those are the things that you want to put in, like other terms and conditions, like getting a wood destroying insect report.
Right.
Transferring the balance of the flood insurance policy to the buyer. Transferring the termite contract. Things like that. Those are the things that you want to document and make sure is in there and that everybody's aware of it. So that you're not sitting there, well, I thought this or I thought that. Even so far as to spell out, leave the range, leave the microwave, things like that, even though they're considered installed appliances, unless it's like a tabletop microwave or something. It's supposed to stay in there based on the verbiage of the purchase agreement. But there are some sellers that will take that anyways, or home theater speakers, or security systems, or blinds, or shades, or curtains. That's all supposed to stay with the home because they're considered fixtures.
Well, what I started doing, we do most everything online now. So we face to face is unfortunately not what it used to be, which is the best way to do business. But as you hear horror stories about people, agents and sellers, they'll receive an offer and miss things that are typed into the financing options on the terms and conditions and the general terms and conditions on the purchase agreement because it blends in with the pre-printed form. I started using a different font, a different size font, and generally write it in red. If it's something I'm going to add, I'll write it in red to make sure when they look at it, it jumps out at them. So I want them to know what the real offer is. I don't want them to miss something and then come back and try to fix it after the fact. I want to present the offer in as good a light as we can, but present it factually and have it considered instead of receiving it, accepting it, and then find out that's grandma's headboard on the bed that they would be a deal killer for them, and the buyers wanted it, and they didn't realize it.
Yeah, and I'm not consistent about it. I like to do it in a different color also, so it stands out. But I've heard tell of some agents where they actually will put other terms and conditions and shrink the font so it looks closer to the pre-printed stuff on the form on the purchase agreement,
right,
to make it easier to miss.
And that's not how I do it. That's not how it should be done. But I know that there's some people that do that.
Yeah.
So I think the next thing we ought to talk about is one of your favorite topics, and that is the good faith deposit. When you write an offer, it just shows that you are serious enough about making that offer that you're willing to allow us to hold the deposit in escrow. And there's a multitude of ways that can happen. So I'm going to let Clint talk about his favorite subject.
So, and this is one of the important things I talk about with buyers when we're doing a buyer consultation. We have the option to have one of the brokers hold the deposit, whether it's the listing brokerage or the selling brokerage, which would be the brokerage representing the buyer. But there's also an option to have a third party hold the deposit. which would be like a title company or real estate attorney, whoever's doing the closing. I always advocate that the brokerage holds the deposit. Not every brokerage is set up with a deposit account, a non-interest bearing deposit account. So they'll say third party to hold good faith deposit. Well, that's only if everybody agrees to that. The big issue, and why I always advise against that, is that if a third party holds the deposit and the buyer and seller can't come to an agreement when the deal falls apart on who gets the deposit, then the third party's not going to make a decision. And they're going to wind up having to go in front of a judge to get the matter decided on who gets a deposit back. Whereas if a brokerage holds the deposit, then the Louisiana Real Estate Commission has clearly defined rules on who gets the deposit based on how the deal fell apart or for what reason the deal fell apart. And there's no questions, there's no hemming and hawing. They have the rules, it's black and white, and they give the deposit back to who deserves the deposit back based on the rules spelled out in the purchase agreement. And so I always advocate, whether it's the listing or selling brokerage, that a brokerage holds the good faith deposit.
Yeah,
/RAM.
Excuse me. The broker has the prerogative to make a decision. The broker may also throw it into the court if there's a deep disagreement. But if it's clear that the buyer requested to cancel the contract within the inspection period, the broker will release the money to the buyer. Whereas a third party would need the buyers and the sellers, all of them, to sign off on before they're willing to do that. So there's a lot more control if a real estate broker holds the deposit. So that's just a thought. There's some brokerages, like Clint said, are not set up to take it, and they advocate for a third party to hold it. And Clint and I both pushed back on that. We want either the listing broker or the selling broker, and generally, whatever side of the transaction I'm on, I want to go ahead and hold it with Keller Williams.
Yeah. So let's see. What's the? I'm looking at a purchase agreement here.
What did we miss?
So
we talked about timelines, inspections.
So I was fixing to say we kind of danced around it, but we didn't really talk about the due diligence and inspection period.
Okay. Generally, Clint and I were talking before. I guess it was earlier in this podcast. I don't like jamming people up. I want to give people time to make an informed and intelligent decision to move forward. Some agents are of the mindset that they want to get the inspection done in 3 or 4 or 7 days and put pressure on the buyer, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, and the inspector to get it all done in a timely fashion. And I don't think that makes for a healthy transaction. I'd rather have another day or 3 in the inspection period to give everybody time to get the inspection scheduled, get it done, let the buyer digest it, decide how they want to respond to it. The buyer's agent drafts the document according to the buyer's wishes, gets the buyer to sign it. The seller's agent then gets it, and then they in turn give it to the seller, who then needs time to digest their response. So it does take time, and there's weekends and holidays and things. So when you're going to put a time limit or a time frame in the agreement, do take out a calendar and look at it. I had one that wanted a response at 7:00 on Thanksgiving afternoon when we had family in all day, and there was no way they were going to get it at 7 o'clock on Thanksgiving afternoon. We ended up making a deal and closing on it, but that did cause the buyers, the sellers, and the buyer's agent a whole lot of more grief than it needed to. So just look at a calendar and be realistic on the time frames, and how long it takes the inspector to schedule it, and what's his turnaround time. And so I don't think you want to, as your response to the inspections, asking for an extension without having done the inspections.
Yeah, so I typically ask for 14 days for inspections and due diligence. That way, if the first and second choice for the buyer's inspector, if their calendars are full, it gives you some options, gives you a little bit of time, but also if some of the results from the home inspection report require further inspection by a licensed professional,
Right.
So say they call into question the operation of the air conditioning or HVAC unit, then you would want to bring in an HVAC professional to evaluate that unit. So not only are you trying to schedule the home inspection, but then you got to bring in that professional or an electrician or a plumber or a foundation engineer or something like that to evaluate everything further. 2 weeks gives you time to find out if there's any issues and then schedule any further inspections before you submit your response to the sellers. So I know there's some that push back and say, well, I want it done in 10 days. And that's probably doable, but, it's kind of a case by case basis, and right now, the way the current market is, it's not like there's 7 other people waiting to buy that house.
Right.
Uh, so there's no reason to try and push things, and then when I'm writing an offer, I try and give 3 days or so and give the sellers till the end of the day at 5 o'clock to respond. So that way they can get like you said, get the listing agent gets the offer. They communicate that to the seller, and then the seller can digest it and decide how they want to respond. It's like getting an offer at 6 o'clock in the evening, and the offer expires at 9 o'clock the next morning. That's
9 o'clock that night.
Well, yeah, I've had one or two like that too, but I call that excuse the phrase, but that's chicken shit.
From the inspection standpoint, if you need to go into an HVAC or electrical or plumbing issues, you need to give yourself time for that, because the inspectors are usually pretty responsive because they know we're dealing with timelines when we schedule the actual inspections. So we can usually get that done between 1 and 3 days. But if something's found, if you start calling an electrician or plumber or HVAC guy on the 3rd or 4th day of a 7-day inspection period, you're already behind the curve as far as getting any information from them, because they're not nearly as responsive as the inspectors are. They'll come, but we might not be able to get that done in 3 or 4 days. So it just gives you time for the normal course of business to run its course without jamming people up. And I like your 14 days.
Yeah, it's a reasonable amount of time.
Is.
Usually by the 8th day, I've got my inspection response submitted. And that's typical. But I always like to have that buffer.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have to wait the 14 days if you get it done.
Correct. So the only other thing as part of the offer, well, actually, it's not really a major part of the offer unless there's already activity going on, is mineral rights. For the most part, most properties that we will write offers on for buyers, mineral rights are really an afterthought. Everybody wants to have an oil field, an oil deposit under their house so they can collect royalties. But as someone who used to work in oil and gas, the majority of the lands around here does not have oil and gas deposits under them. Or if they do, nobody's going to be coming drill for them anytime soon.
Yeah.
And unless I'm mistaken, even if you do, they don't transfer the mineral rights. If nobody does anything with them for 10 years, they revert back to whoever the current surface owner is.
Right. The and the mineral rights is a whole industry amongst itself. But normally on residential lots, you buy a house in a subdivision, the mineral rights have been reserved by a previous landowner, the previous owner. So chances are the people that are selling the house don't own the mineral rights anyway. So it is a non-issue, and then whatever their rights are transferred to the new owner. But if we just start talking about large tracts of land, then mineral rights become a big deal. I've never seen mineral rights kill a house, a residential deal. I've seen mineral rights kill a 500-acre tract of land. So on a residential purchase agreement, it's generally not an issue. There are some subdivisions that do have some active mineral production on them locally, but not a whole lot. And if they're active, they're going to be specific that they're reserving the mineral rights. So generally, it's not an issue, and generally they're transferred with to the new owner, unless they're specifically reserved by the seller. And I'm not a lawyer. If the cash sale is silent on the mineral rights are transferred. They have to be specifically reserved to the seller for the seller to retain the mineral rights, and they give up any rights to the surface for any mineral activity.
All right. I think we've covered a good bit about crafting an offer and what goes into a purchase agreement. So I'd like to remind everybody, if you found this interesting, if you find it informative, to like, comment, and share with your friends.
Yeah, and Clint and I are both available for conversation, whether it's phone calls, text, or email. All our contact information is in the podcast. We'd be happy to talk to you about whatever question you have. Whether you're actively buying or selling right now, if you just have a question, pick up the phone, call, text, and we'd be happy to respond.
Yeah. So if you listen to podcasts, pretty much any podcast app, search for RE Real Estate Podcast, and you should be able to find us because we've covered pretty much all of them. So, all right. Until next time.
All right, Clint, have a good one. Thanks for watching.
You too, man. Bye-bye.
While we may discuss topics such as lending, interest rates, title law, real estate law, and appraisals in addition to real estate sales and transactions, please remember that we are only trained and licensed as real estate salespeople in Louisiana. The information shared on this podcast is for general purposes only and should not be taken as legal or financial advice. We may be agents, but unless we have signed paperwork stating otherwise, we are not your agents.